On this episode of the show, I have with me Zach Barney. He is co-founder and CEO at Mobly. We're going to be talking about his journey, and we're not sure exactly what that looks like yet, but he might have been heading down the spy track. We'll let him explain. And he is a founder now. And we're going to talk to him about being in the public sector, a career-altering injury, coming from a large family. He fell into sales, but he always wanted to do more. And we're going to ask him, some of the ins and outs of how he decided to start this company and why. Maybe a little bit about the economic uncertainty and how he's managing it in the last couple of years. Zach, thanks for being on the show.
I am very, very grateful to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, man. I appreciate your time. Could you tell us what your company Mobly does?
Yeah, Mobly is the system of record for event marketers. The easiest way to think of us is you think about HubSpot and Marketo, the core tools that digital marketers use. We are that for field and event marketers. For far too long, they've been stuck using spreadsheets and duct tape and Band-Aids to do their job. And Mobly is here to fix that and provide a universal system of lead retrieval, enrichment, and engagement for when you only have your phone in front of you, no laptop.
Awesome. Sounds like a pretty intriguing product. Could be a whole episode on that. But this episode, we're going to be talking about your journey. And I guess before we talk about the journey, I was going to ask you this question. I was going to save it for a little bit later, but I'm just kind of curious. You're a founder now, CEO. You've definitely have a well-rounded experience working in the sales industry, as I alluded to. Did you always want to be a founder? I guess just to start off the conversation.
I did. I've always been very entrepreneurial. I'm the oldest of 8 children, and my dad is a CFO, but he's a very passive professional in that he doesn't take what's his. He doesn't seize opportunities. So he's been very successful from a titular perspective, but I feel like we were always tight on money. We were always just struggling to make ends meet, and I never wanted to be in that same situation. Not that it was his fault by any means, but I wanted to take control of my own destiny and not be beholden to somebody else writing me a paycheck. So I've definitely always had that in my head. But I also knew that the best companies are founded by founders who are trying to solve their own personal problem. I didn't just want to say, hey, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm going to build something. It was, let's find a real problem that I want solved. And it took till now to do that, but we're here.
All right. So we're gonna jump into the Wayback Machine now, kind of go back to a little bit of the origin story. I wrote down in my notes for the theme from a spy to founder. I told you I won't call it that, but I was as a prompt to kind of dive into your earlier part of your career. Talk to us a little bit about your time in the public sector. Obviously, be good to understand some of what you were doing, what your thoughts were, and kind of how fulfilled you were in the public sector.
Yeah. So right out of school, I actually jumped into a bootstrap startup, and I did startup land for 10 years or so. Bootstrap, venture-backed, high growth. I did it all and loved it. But I also realized that because I've done nothing but startups for my career, there's a lot that I don't know. I don't know what a well-oiled machine looks like. So I had the opportunity. I was recruited to join a company that was publicly traded out of Sydney, Australia, called Nearmap. And it was a really unique situation in that they had a lot of money being publicly traded, but we're still operating very much like a startup in the U.S. We were doing roughly $5 million in revenue in the U.S. when I joined. So it was running a startup, but with daddy's money, selling to state and local governments, selling to architecture firms, construction companies, you name it. Grew that from 5 to 30 million in just shy of 3 years of me being there. And it was fun, but also a lot of the same, a lot of the headache that you could imagine with a larger organization in terms of bureaucracy and just red tape to get anything done. So I then actually joined a PE firm and was a drop-in sales operator for close to 3 years. So we verticalized our investments. I was in the automotive vertical. Any of the automotive companies we acquired, if it was a revenue problem, which was why they were sold to PE, it was my job to fix it. So I would come in and analyze, get them a little bit more efficient, sometimes have to fire people, unfortunately, and then bring on a full-time leader or keep it myself long-term. So at any given time, I'd have between 3 and 5, maybe 6 portfolio companies that I was running the revenue organization for. And it was really those last 2 companies, Nearmap and Velo, that really spawned the pain that Mobly is solving for me.
Interesting. I guess when earlier part of your career, obviously you had mentioned a career-altering injury, and obviously I'd like to kind of understand some of those things change trajectories greatly. But great to kind of see what that was and how it did impact you.
I was just finishing up school. I had a conditional offer from NSA to go be a spy, basically. And that's what I, throughout college, that's what I thought I was going to do for a while. I majored in Russian. I speak Russian fluently, spent several years out there. And then I got engaged. And at the same time, I tore my knee apart playing intramural basketball. And when I say tore my knee apart, ACL, MCL, PCL, meniscus in multiple places, just everything, all with 2 months left in school. And it was just this weird thing where I had actually been given permission by the university to graduate without completing my minor because I had this offer from NSA, and it just didn't feel right. My fiance at the time, now my wife, just was having a hard time thinking about moving to DC, wanted to stay here in Utah where we're at. And I was bedridden for a long time. So that ended up kind of blowing up in my face, and it worked out for the better. I needed to make some money. So I found that sales job at that bootstrap startup that I mentioned. He was a young founder that was willing to take a chance on me, and the rest, as they say, is history. I unfortunately not history with my knee. I've had multiple issues since. Had a surgery about 4 years ago, and then 3 weeks ago I just had a total knee replacement because the damage just happened all again on Christmas Eve as I was carrying some Christmas presents upstairs. I stubbed my toe and tore 3 more things. And by that time, the surgeon was like, it's just time. So I'm here kneeling on a chair in our recording studio right now because I'm trying to give a little relief to my left leg.
Wow. That sounds, what a change of course going from NSA to spy to sales, which obviously sometimes when you are thrust in a position where you have to take action and find a different path, we do that. And I'm kind of curious, it sounds like, you're fluent in Russian, you're thinking about being a spy. That seems like something far removed from sales. Why sales? Why at the time did you think I'll dive into sales?
I think sales is the most entrepreneurial job you can have without being an entrepreneur. You have more control over your own income than any other job role. So I needed to make a lot of money. I didn't have a degree in accounting or finance like my dad. I didn't have the qualifications to go be an educator or a lawyer. There aren't many people that are hiring for people that are fluent in Russian outside of the government. So I needed to make a lot of money, and I waited tables all through college. I was really, really good at selling it. It's actually how I met my wife. Had a group of women that loved me so much they became my regular customers and ultimately introduced me to my wife, who was this director of the dance studio that all of their daughters danced at. So it was natural for me. I'd never considered it as a career because I had thought sales was kind of slimy, but I needed to make some money and had that opportunity and fell in love with it really, really quickly.
That's a pretty remarkable story. And when you look back, obviously the company, and you've taken the sales experience and you've turned it into a company. Obviously, you identified the problem. During your time within sales, sounds like you always wanted to be, run your own business. You even went in sales because it's more entrepreneurial, which makes absolute sense. Were you consciously taking notes of gaps or problems or issues as you were kind of going through the sales career ladder? Was that something that was top of mind, or was it something just not in context at the time?
I would say the biggest thing, yes, I knew I was always going to eventually start a company. The biggest thing that I was doing was consuming content. I was listening to a bunch of podcasts. I love the 20 VC podcast with Harry Stebbings. I love the Saster podcast. I devour the whole Startup Revolution book series from Brad Feld and Techstars. And, I worked at very early stage startups where I was rubbing shoulders with the founders all the time. I've worked with my brother-in-law who co-founded two of the companies that I worked at as his first hire. So I was absorbing anything I could while taking note of, hey, what can we do to solve this problem and this problem? Absolutely. But the biggest thing I was doing was just consuming content so that when I did stumble across that killer idea, that I was the person most well prepared to capitalize on it.
Interesting. I mean, pretty phenomenal trajectory, to be honest with you, to be within that, path of being a spy, which I don't think a lot of people would relate to. I mean, it's got to be a different choice. Your wife wasn't interested in moving to DC, the knee injury into sales, and you're a founder now. I guess as you kind of look back, and you did want to become a founder, that does make a lot of sense. When you start, obviously you've worked for a couple of startups as well, so I think that gives you some context. But when you actually decide to start your own business and take on that risk and have to deliver for yourself, what was in your mind? Because obviously it sounds like the spy path was a definitive path towards a very dynamic, but maybe secure and yet uncertain future. Kind of a couple of things in there, right? I mean, I think when you work for the government, it's pretty secure, but within that context of how far into the spy game you're going to be, there's probably dangers and other things, and depending on where you're actually working. And then obviously you went in sales, which is a lot of risk, other flip side. And then starting a founder is kind of like you're taking some of the risks, the unknown of what could happen with you, and versus the potential that could be unlimited or could be zero. What were you considering as your risks? What were you considering as the things that you were probably most worried about when you're like, hey, I see this opportunity in Mobly and I want to take it?
Providing for my family. I mentioned I'm the oldest of 8, but I didn't really mention that I'm also a father of 5. So 5 children ranging from ages 14 to 6 right now, and 2 dogs, a house, multiple vehicles, a certain lifestyle that we had gotten used to as a VP of sales at a PE firm, making a lot of money. My wife comes from a family where her dad is a phenomenal human being and had a lot of failed false start businesses. So she had a ton of fear and trepidation, and combining with the fact that I was making still twice as much as I'm paying myself now, like that was absolutely the biggest thing that we had to consider. So thankfully, I had a nice exit at a previous company and was able to self-fund the business for a while, live off of savings. And so the timing really worked out, but yeah, that's by far the biggest factor in risk for sure.
Yeah, and you mentioned that even obviously early on, you wanted to, when you first went into the sales world, you wanted to get a job and provide. I mean, it sounds like you certainly are not worried about rolling up your sleeves and digging in and starting the startup. Obviously, you had an exit. You mentioned there was a little bit of a cushion there, which is all great. When you're within that, first window of I'm actually, the realization of I'm actually running my own business and I'm now responsible for all the other things versus the sales part, you have to align yourself to, the right CTO with the right co-founders. How did you meet your co-founders? How did you how'd you meet them?
So I've got one co-founder, my COO. He and I are best friends of 30 years. When I first moved to Utah, we were in the same 6th grade class. We lived 6 doors down from each other, played every sport together, played every position in every sport together because we were the exact same size until like junior year of high school where he had a major growth spurt. We've done everything together for years. And my career has been more sales and startups. His career has been more product engineering and late stage companies. So we complement each other really well. We always wanted to start something together. And the timing was just right. I asked him if he wanted to do this with me. Having not come from a sales background, he didn't quite have the same conviction that I did in this space. So we did the product thing and we went and interviewed 30 companies. And 29 of the 30 said, yeah, this is not a Zach problem. This is an industry problem. Please build it. We will pay you to solve it. And that was enough conviction for him to say, yeah, this is real. Let's do it. I'm passionate about it now too. Yeah. And then our CTO, while he's not a co-founder, he's kind of an honorary co-founder. He joined us about 6 months in. Chris, my co-founder, and Joe were both CTOs in the portfolio of a very prominent investor here in Utah. And they got to know each other through that network 10 years ago. So we had Joe actually as our first technical advisor. And when it came time to hire a CEO, we had asked him for some references, which he provided, not thinking that he'd be interested because he's had a few big exits and was just ready to call it quits. But then after a few days, he threw his hat in the ring and said, I can't find a reason to say no. I keep looking for one and everything's telling me I need to say yes. Would you guys consider me? And yeah, we considered him. We brought him on immediately.
That's awesome. I mean, to start a company, most people, 6 months in, there's no CTO. What did those 6 months look like? Were you still building the product without a CTO? Was the product just more discussion? What happened in those 6 months?
Yeah. We had launched an MVP. So Chris is semi-technical. We have a dev shop, and I don't recommend using dev shops in early stage because you're never going to get funding if you do. But we had a kind of a unique relationship where Chris is pretty technical. We just needed more manpower behind it. So he oversaw everything, and we had a few contractors help us out in launching the MVP. We had the MVP in market for, 2 or 3 months by the time that Joe joined. And then we launched out of beta 3 months after he joined.
Very cool. I mean, the trajectory has been very interesting. In this economic climate, obviously you started post-pandemic, post that 2021, 22 boom where it seemed like, you could just say you had a company and you got funded. You started in 23 where we started seeing a tangible slowdown. How does the economic climate, just kind of pivoting, because I am kind of curious how you've managed this. I mean, you've got a good work history as well. So how have you managed this economic climate as a founder? Obviously, you probably do have people in your network. You mentioned your CTO was previously exited, you've exited. So you know what it was like in the zero interest rate days. But how are you viewing this time period?
So this is going to sound a little bit arrogant, but we haven't really felt it outside of fundraising. Fundraising was a beast. Going out and raising our first pre-seed round at the end of 2023 caused me to have 4 to 5 panic attacks a week for a number of months. And that was bad. That was hard. That was the only thing about it that was hard, though. We're solving a real need. Events post-pandemic are back at an all-time high, so we're very opportunistic on that, where people realize how much they missed the face-to-face interactions after sitting in their Zoom rooms for 2 years. So we haven't really felt much of that. And I would say, candidly, we capitalized on it. Like when everybody else was sitting on their laurels trying to conserve money, we decided to go innovate. Like best companies are oftentimes built during recessions. Like Zoom was built during the economic downturn after the housing crisis, and now they're worth tens of billions of dollars because they were building while everybody else was shutting down.
That's a fair. And actually, it's interesting. I'm starting to take note of companies and trajectories that started during the pandemic. And then in that 23 and beyond time period, I kind of look at that 2022 period as we're going to see how those companies are going to mature because they're obviously going to need to figure out something with their model, the funding, all that stuff, at some point. And I think actually, I'm not sure which is more challenging, having been a startup during the pandemic or right now where rates are sky high. I don't know. I don't envy founders, but obviously, you guys are selling the product. You've mentioned everything outside of funding. If you're kind of looking forward with uncertainty, I don't know when rates are going to, I'm not an economist. I have no idea when rates are going to dip down to something, to what we're traditionally used to. And I'm sure VCs would love to see it as well. When you project out your roadmap, does that impact you? Are you worried about that? Or is that something where execution first, you deal with the funding when the funding issue comes up?
I can't really afford to worry about it too much right now. We have so many things in front of us, so much opportunity that we're just focused on executing to the best of our abilities. And the best companies are still getting money. It's the companies that, were in that bottom half during the ZERP era that got a check because they had a pulse that should be worried. The companies that are built on strong foundations and have good unit economics, I'm not worried, will still get cash. Very
cool, man. I love the story. The spy that would have been is an interesting lead at dinner parties, but I appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on and sharing your story and kind of how you've grown to be a founder. If somebody does want to reach out to you to just ask you any questions about the journey or anything about your experiences, what's a good way of doing that?
LinkedIn's best. Just don't automate it. I can smell automation from a mile away. You can find me on LinkedIn. I have a cell phone emoji in front of my name, so that LinkedIn algorithm thinks my first name is cell phone emoji, last name is Zach Barney. Be authentic and reach out to me, and I promise you I will respond. Might not be the response that you want, but I will engage and at least tell you why I'm not interested or interested. I highly recommend that channel.
Okay, awesome. We'll make sure to include that in the show notes. And again, thanks for your time. Thanks for coming on and sharing with us.
Thanks for having me, Amir.
Absolutely. All right, that's the end of this show. We'll be back, different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. One, obviously we talked to Zach about his journey from, understanding about a large family and some of what he viewed was some of the early formulations of wanting to be an entrepreneur, going through a career-altering injury, not being able to take a job with the NSA, through the sales career ladder and eventually being a founder. He's obviously got a fantastic background, inspirational to everyone that potentially wants to pivot from something super not tech to CEO. I actually am loving the fact that I'm interviewing people that are CEOs that don't have to be technical. And I think it's really good for everyone to see, especially in the age of AI, where it seems like it's going to be a lot easier to be a founder without that technical background. So share this episode with somebody who's thinking about taking the step. Zach's journey definitely is good. And reach out to him if you have any questions specific to his journey. Please don't just message him otherwise. Also, like, subscribe, comment. Let me know how the show is going for you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.